Hello, Jamie. Here we are
Hi,
again.
hi, hello again.
I was been thinking so much over the past week about our last podcast, and we've both kind of had so many different ideas for directions of how this should go. But I guess something that's really been very, I guess, prominent and key to themes in your Substack this week is around memory and GLP and memory. And I just wonder whether we could perhaps explore that a little bit together.
Well, certainly, that's the Substacks for me are places that I store things
Hmm.
digitally that I might need later. That's how it started. And if you go way, way, way back, there's a few academic articles that nobody would take. And then there was, oh, I'm kind of holding this, news article, whatever. Maybe we comment about it. But I found it a better place to place all of this kind of long form thought, to clear it out and leave it there. I may not need it for years, I may not ever need it, but to put it there. And so this week I've been processing something quite heavy, I think.
Yeah.
Um, Prior to our last meeting, I had a pretty serious meltdown. It had to do with the way memories are stored in our brains as GLPs, and essentially multiple memory spaces, multiple nows, collapsed into one, and it was a bit heavy. It was I would say like viscous, right? It was very thick. It was very, everything is kind of confusing in that way. So I had panic attack first. I had meltdown at home, took the next day off, and so on. And then I did manage to stitch myself together and, do my best for our podcast and the conference appearance. But in processing all of that, because I cannot just like, oh, okay, dust it off and off to the next thing, right?
Hmm.
For me, and I think for us, based on the responses I've had to these pieces this week, um, this is kind of how we work, right? And so we store memory, experience, feeling, smell, the trauma of things when somebody's yelling at us, when there's high stakes and jeopardy and stuff.
Hmm.
If we kind of process it in the now, we store it and we may retrieve it later.
Hmm.
And so that's what happened. But I didn't try to retrieve it. It just, my brain made associations and said, oh, you're safe now. Here you go. Except I was in the classroom, right? I was speaking with a student and I crashed, and I borrowed a Neil Stevenson book title, Snow Crash, for when that happens, like an old telly, when you're off channel and it's just snow. That's kind of how it feels.
Hmm.
And so I was writing around that because at the time I had no real scripts to kind of explain to my wife, explain to colleagues, like, to my wife, why am I melting down right now? The next day to supervision and to colleagues, why am I not coming today? Then
Yeah.
on the Monday, why I wasn't there, because so much of adult society wants neat answers. They want,
Yeah.
succinct summaries. They do not like when I start talking about something that's passionate, I can go on, as you know, for quite some time, right? And they don't
Yeah.
like that. There's no stamina for that. And so in my memory space, in my vocal space, I it's just this kind of mush, kind of cornmeal porridge.
Yeah.
There's no real shape to it. And so, first job was try to dissect what's going on, and I had not really thought about it this way. And then to kind of write around it. And then, what happens when memory arrives all at once,
Mm.
right? How does that feel? How does that impact us, especially if it's traumatic?
Yeah.
Um, and then, kind of what psychiatry might call rumination. Why do we keep talking about the same things all the time, right? Well, why do Gestalt processors return to the same script,
Hmm.
right? We're feeling around it, we're savoring it, we're working through it. And yes, it sounds the same because it's a script. That's how
Yeah.
they work,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then if it's if the trauma is related to gaslighting, then it's even worse,
Yeah.
right? Because now you kind of trust what's going on in your head. And you have to kind of work through that. But yeah, that was kind of the week of
Yeah.
writing. As I kind of put writing myself into coherence. Because even at my age, I still don't have a lot of phrases for things that happen, right?
Yeah.
I don't have a catchy line for this happened to me, right? And so I can call it like temporal compression or whatever. I'm still not comfortable with that, but that's kind of what happens. All of these nows arrive once, and they're in my consciousness competing in the same time, right? So
Yeah.
so a then has arrived now and
Yeah.
wants to be now, but it's then
Yeah.
and it won't go away. Um, there's no real, random controlled trial about this. There's no um, let's traumatize, half of the group and leave the other group alone. I'll see what happens, right? There's no way that you could ethically build a study to examine what happens to us when this happens. And so I know in my own life, and I know in talking with other adults, autistic GLPs, this kind of time shift internally is behind a lot of meltdown. And so there's nothing you can do about it because you have to live life,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that is the bulk of the week's writings. And also, I think there's a few more behind that. Tomorrow, the title of tomorrow's is this trauma or is this how my mind works?
Yeah.
Right. So that we don't gaslight ourselves. And behind that is kind of what we're doing right now, talking as
Yeah.
memory integrity for us. But for us talking, it looks different. It's not like therapeutic. Like, Jamie, will you please narrow it down? What about your traumatic childhood led you to this? And um, it's not that way.
No.
It must arrive whole. Um, and then even on the other Substack, um, these are answers to questions that people have asked, and oftentimes it's pleasant to step into those experiences again. That things I haven't considered, and um, a piece that I have coming for the outside just before Christmas, when like the timing of starting the other one was relative to safety as a different person, let's just say,
Mm.
in a profession with very rigid culture. My first 2 years as a teacher, they could fire me without cause, and I would be banished from the school district. I'm working in never to return again. Right.
Yeah.
So there's that. And so I have to perform teacher as they expected. And then after the third year is when you can get tenure. So I have to perform those 3 years, and then I have to ask for tenure. And then I have to go through a program called induction, which is 2 years of supervised teaching and they're observing and all of these kinds of things. And again, I have to perform the expected teacher.
Mhm.
And at the end of that, which I achieved at the end of last school year, you can apply for your lifetime teaching credential. And so I have it. And and I have tenure. So now I'm free to be me. I'm free to integrate everything in my life. I'm free to be crazy with scarves. I'm crazy with color, and no, I don't like the dreary colors of the school, and I don't, you know, I've had the bully in my life that was the memory that dropped into my head, a week ago. Um, she was insistent that I wear the school polo shirt and all of that kind of stuff. Well, they don't make them in my size. So what am I supposed to do? Right? And then I'm a fairly modest person. And so even if they did make them in my size, I don't know that I'd want to be walking around all shapely like that, right? And so I tend to dress kind of loose and baggy and stuff like that. Um, but no, I'm quite tall, and they don't standard stuff, they don't assume somebody's 6'7",
No.
right? And certainly woman stops at 6 or 5'6", and
Mhm.
so there is no such thing as a woman that's taller than 5'10", and she's a freak, and these kinds of things. But when you're autistic person, employment is so precious and it's
Yeah.
so hard to get, and
Mhm.
so I'm very thankful in my first career in civil service, and I have a pension from that. I'm very grateful. And now I'm happy to be a contracted teacher,
Yeah.
and have that tenure and have, contributing to another pension that maybe I'll be able to afford to take, these kinds of things. But I think, since I sense the squirrels coming, um, the key to all of this is safety,
Yeah.
right? My body and my emotional space knows that I'm secure in my housing, that I'm secure in my career, that, if I do happen to melt down, or if I do want to express myself as a whole person,
Mm,
it won't affect my career and
yeah.
and my ability to provide for my family.
And I guess
Um,
that, Jamie, when talking about safety, that immediately makes me on the children and young people that we both support is do they always feel that felt safe because or getting them out of a situation where it feels overwhelming, whether it, and the whole experience, like you say, the sensory, the emotion, what's being said to them at that time, how that's making them feel. And so, and you, when you're talking about safety, is that over many years you've gained that. And I sort of, in my head, I'm thinking, gosh, how can we, our children, to feel that safety? What can we do to support them? There's a question.
I think so. I think there was a question in there, but um, on Tuesdays at school, we have our teacher meetings,
Mm,
and we've had a massive relational fracture at my school. There are bullies in
yeah,
the staff, there's bullies in the student body, there are factions and so on. And I think the principal is attempting to do some kind of relational repair.
yeah.
And she has an instructional coach, a wonderful young woman, who thought, well, we do this circle, right, where we all kind of come together and try to heal a bit, in departments or whatever.
Mm,
And I thought to myself, well, that's in a lot of unscripted words. I don't feel safe there, really. And so I wrote 11 pages of notes, right, about, the top 10 reasons why I think this is a horrible idea. Um, because I kind of trust these things, these corporate things, and I was very much dreading it. But then when I stepped into it, and prior to the event, I shared my notes with her.
mhm,
She's pursuing a doctorate, and this is part of the thing that she's working towards. So I've tried to be very cooperative with her. Um, but then when I got there and I saw who was facilitating it, it's a man I trust eminently. And so I stepped into the circle and participated. And I
mm,
kind of did my best to narrate how I experienced circle as a GLP. And it's a funny thing because when when you're asked for, like, tell me that one word you're feeling right now, right? As a GLP, there's panic, right? And oftentimes that one word is not in English for me, right? I wrote about, a couple of years ago about how the word that popped up was German, and on Tuesday it was in Gaelic. So, I just had to kind of drop it there, and everybody looking at me all kind of puzzled. Um, and then I didn't know why that came to mind. It just came to
mm,
mind, and so, okay, here you are. And then it's silence, and they don't know what to make of it, and we go around. And the next round, I've had the time to kind of recover and try to figure out why that word popped into my head.
yeah.
uh, and I was feeling anxiety from my colleague to my left, um, because he's germophobic, and there's all this passing of tokens, and touch your hands here and stuff, and there's no hand sanitizer for him, and I can feel him as a GLP. I can feel him. I'm attuned. I've supported him for like 4 years now, so I know him quite well, and I can feel his like absolute popping anxiety. And then to the right of me is a young man who's experiencing grief at the loss of his grandmother, and it's like this doesn't seem like it's what he wants to do. It's not how he wants to process. And so I'm as a GLP, as an attuned autistic person, I'm feeling all of this stuff.
Hmm.
And to realize that this word that popped to my head was the kind of word that I centered my own grief and processing the trauma and loss of my own grandmother. And so I'm feeling my colleague's pain, and it's reminding me of when I lost my dear grandmother. And so when it comes time to explain, I say the word smuinche, and I explain that there are some words in any language that don't translate directly
Mm.
into host language, right? And this happens to be one of them.
But
But
that was your
it's
script for that emotion. That was
exactly,
your
exactly.
Gestalt.
Yes, yes. And that is kind of the talisman, if you will, the touchstone of when I'm processing that deep and profound loss,
Yeah.
the experience of the loss of my grandmother. Um, that's the one word that captures it for me. Um,
And I guess
and again,
it's,
every
yeah, for people on the outside, it's acknowledging and responding, or not responding, just acknowledging that as your script, and trying to be curious about what it might mean, because whilst that what everyone might be going, oh, what's Jamie saying, I don't understand, that doesn't make sense to me, in the same way that the children and young people that I work with, they say scripts that don't seem to fit with
right.
the situation, but it's meaningful to them. And so that, I always feel it's about curiosity. It's about thinking, well, actually, what could Jamie be feeling and thinking in this moment? What could that be about?
And I, I appreciate that because especially as the younglings that don't have a rich vocabulary, they
No.
don't have a lot of scrapes. Um, and I'm a big fan for those that read the Substacks. I'm a big fan of play and learning through play, and learning everything through play. And I think play provides a bit of safety. You can be silly, you can be foolish, you can make mistakes, and it's just play, right?
Yeah.
We hit the reset button, in Super Mario Kart or whatever, and we try again, and we keep trying. And so I'm a big fan of play. I think in adult life, the profession that I happen to be in, they take themselves too seriously. And when I tend to get nervous, I get silly a bit. And when I'm at a loss for words, sometimes, as Tuesday and previous, the thing that shows up is not easily explainable, is not English, right? And the funny event that I wrote about a few years ago in a professional development that I thought was just absolutely boring, and it was a sales presentation, it wasn't professional development and all that kind of stuff. And the thing that popped to my head, and you might be able to appreciate this having been in Germany, is oftentimes German sarcasm is like it's a very appropriate word, but it's kind of the inverse of it. And so when the host was trying to get some compliments, and she said, here's some note cards and write the one word that you're taking away from this event, that describes, everything, whatever. I wrote nützlich, and then I had to explain it, right? And so she sees, the umlauts and all of that stuff, and so she asks me, Dr. Hoerricks, what is that word? And I said, oh, it's a German word. It means it's nützlich. It means useful, right? And of course, in German sarcasm, it's the opposite of that. It's like, oh God, right? But it's a way. I don't know if it's a mask or not, but it's. I think when we are pressured to give that one thing, often something silly comes to
Yeah.
kind of take the pressure off of ourselves. And I think a lot of us adults use a bit of humor and sarcasm to kind of deflect and
A mask.
yes, a
Yeah.
mask. So um, it's not necessarily a refusal. It's I'm not prepared in this setting to be myself fully.
Well, it goes back to
Right.
safety again, doesn't it?
Aye, it
It's
does.
it's not safe. And I think without that felt safety in, asking people to express how they're feeling in quite a wide public group of people that you're unsure of because you have lived experience and a gestalt of them being bullying, or have I got the
Right.
right group? Yeah. Um,
Aye.
so it
Well,
doesn't feel safe. So what do you say? You perhaps revert back to a word that held meaning from when you lived in Germany.
aye. And other things that happen, Dr. Hoerricks, you have all of this experience, whatever. We'd like you to join the committee on positive behavior supports. Well, no, I'd rather not.
No.
Well, why? You have all this expertise. No, I have all this trauma. I don't want to do anything about it. I don't believe in behaviorism. Obviously, you're not paying attention, right? And these types of things. The very first big thing I put on Substack back in 2022 was a full paper, a full journal paper that had been rejected everywhere. And it came from a conversation I had with a behaviorist who was trying to correct an eighth grader's behavior on something, an autistic boy, Gestalt processor, alexithymic. And I was recognizing a lot of that alexithymic kind of attitude and behavior. And I asked the behaviorist, how can you extinguish behavior that is acquired from
Mm.
the neighbor? Right. So the boy is attuned to his table partner and he's picking up these behaviors and his alexithymia, it's his, right? So how do you extinguish things that keep popping up? And your man said to me, says he, what's alexithymia? Right. And so out of that question, in my usual fashion, came a massive deep dive journal article
Mm.
about, alexithymia and classroom behaviors. And nobody wanted it. So I was thinking at the time, where can I put this? And that's one of the first pieces that went up on Substack for everybody to
Mm.
have. And
I feel like that is just such a meaty kind of area that I think lots of um, people that read your Substack and within, like, not just my own profession but other professions and parents and um, other interested people will really want to hear about. But I think we need to save it for our next session.
oh,
So my squirrel is popping up.
the squirrel's here. We've run out of time.
We've run
Yes.
out of time, sadly, and also because it's so interesting. I don't want you to stop you in your flow, but equally I want to, like, not give it enough time and honor what these words that you're describing, because I think it's going to be fascinating. So maybe not next time, or maybe the time after. Who knows? Our organic
No,
podcast.
it is. I just think in terms of wrapping up, oftentimes, especially as we get older, but even in, early years, teenage years, somebody will say something to us, as GLPs, and it will trigger a whole cascade of interests and things that we know, and we tend to be experts in the things that we love. And just to kind of finish with a wee story, a colleague of mine asked, what was mathematics instruction like when I was a child? So this would have been, kind of early 80s. And I was thinking about the stories that the maths teachers gave in my, secondary school, and they were all Cold Warrior engineers and this kind of thing. And that's how I was able to do well in maths without language, was by scripts and stories. And so I started going off into, four-dimensional non-Euclidean geometric solids and these kinds of things. And I lost him just like that. He was done. And I realized, I can feel that alexithymia, that attunement, I can feel that break. And so at my age, I can stop. I say, oh, okay, I realize you're busy and so on, and I can excuse myself. That's something that a child might just keep going on and on and on and on. Because we inherit those and then we inhabit those memories. And we just want to share. We love to share. And which is why the squirrel exists. Right.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Again, really good meeting with you, and I will see you next week.
Ah, lovely. I wonder what scarf I'll have to wear then.
I know. I'm wondering what lipstick shade and nail varnish shade you'll be wearing.
Aye, exactly. Well, purple for these, but I think that's me.
See you next week.
All right. See you next week.